Hey guys, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today I'm giving you guys an update on the Google data mining situation of patient medical data. Now, if you recall a couple of days ago, I actually did a video on Google that was partnering with Ascension Health as a third-party entity under HIPAA compliance to basically collect tens of millions of patients from Ascension Health. Ascension Health is in 21 states in the United States, and they were essentially data mining this to create better software, better artificial intelligence, etc. But they didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell the patients or the doctors, etc. Now, here's the update on this, because we just learned in the last 24 hours a ton of new information that I think is actually very critical to what could potentially be a slapdown of Google by the United States government and HIPAA on this very issue. Now, the whistleblower published their own article in The Guardian, and I'm going to quote you some excerpts from that article before I actually go ahead and talk about the revelations and my own analysis of this information. And so I quote the whistleblower. I don't know if it's a him or a her, but here we go. And I quote, "I didn't decide to blow the whistle on Google's deal, known internally as the Nightingale Project glibly. The decision came to me slowly, creeping on me through my day-to-day work as one of about 250 people in Google and Ascension working on the project." And I continue, "But over time, I grew increasingly concerned about the security and privacy aspects of the deal. It became obvious that many around me in the Nightingale team also had those anxieties." Also to continue, "Two simple questions kept hounding me. Did patients know about the transfer of their data to the tech giant? Should they be informed and given a chance to opt in or out? And also," I continue, "the answer to the first question basically became quickly apparent. No." In other words, basically, did patients know about the transfer? The answer is no. The answer to the second, I became increasingly convinced about. Yes. In other words, the question was, should they be informed and given a chance to opt out? And the whistleblower is saying, yes, they should be given an option, and no, they weren't informed. And I quote him or her again, "Put the two together, and how could I say nothing?" And I continue with the whistleblower. "What AI algorithms were at work in real time as the data was being transferred across from hospital groups to the search giant? What was Google planning to do with the data they were being given access to? No one seemed to know." Meaning the team that he or she was on within the Google organization had no idea what the end result was of this, even though they were feeding patient data to artificial intelligence and various algorithms, etc. Now, I will give you one last quote here, and there's an entire article that you can read in The Guardian from the whistleblower, but I think these are the key concepts that you need to understand. And so I quote one last time from the whistleblower. "Above all, why was the information being handed over in a form that had not been de-identified, the term the industry uses for removing all personal details so that a patient's medical record could not be directly linked back to them? And why had no patients and doctors been told what was happening? I was worried too about the security aspect of placing vast amounts of medical data in the digital cloud." Now, by virtue of this, that gives the backdrop for why the whistleblower was initially concerned and then basically relayed this to obviously media outlets, including The Guardian, who probably broke this story. And you can go ahead and read all of his or her accounts, because I left out some excerpts, and some of that I'm actually going to talk about in my analysis. But here are the new revelations and things that we really need to talk about when it comes to this entire situation, because the United States Congress is actually now getting involved in this and questioning this with Ascension Health and Google, given Google's past history of data mining and not being transparent. And so originally when this broke, in my video from a couple of days ago, I stated that 150 Google employees had access to the data. The whistleblower confirmed this, but it's actually 250 employees when you count the additional roughly 100 employees that Ascension Health brought into the table to collaborate on Project Nightingale with Google. The other revelation that we have here is that this patient data wasn't de-identified, meaning these 250 total employees between Google and Ascension knew the names and sensitive medical information on said names of these patients. That's obviously a very serious issue. Now, the other thing we have to consider here is that employees at big tech companies are actually looking at this data, but they're not actually in the medical field. They now have access to medical data for development purposes and everything else. And I will talk about that in a little bit. Now, to continue, the public, meaning the patients, were intentionally kept in the dark here, not to mention the doctors as well. So that basically, while this may be the letter of HIPAA law, it definitely isn't the spirit of the law when it comes to third-party consent, which is basically the same with employees at big tech. You kind of want to know where your data is going, and quite frankly, with third-party consent laws, you simply sign a waiver as a patient of Ascension Health saying that Ascension Health has the right to give your information to third parties. Typically, this would mean medical billing and health insurance. In this case, it probably meant medical billing, health insurance, and Google, and nobody was given this option to opt out. And so by virtue of that, the last thing we really learned is that not one single patient here was given the ability to opt out by Ascension Health. And so I think this speaks to a couple of different things here. One, not informing the doctors that were basically running the hospital systems and practices that Ascension Health controlled, nor the patients that were going to these doctors were informed of this, because the doctors were just as mystified as the patients, tells us that both Ascension Health, which would be essentially the front person behind Google, or in front of Google rather, and Google themselves, made a conscious decision to basically say, we're not going to tell anybody that we're doing this. They technically, under the letter of the law, don't have to, but for transparency's sake, they made the conscious choice not to tell basically the world, meaning tens of millions of people, and we actually learned in the whistleblower that it's not tens of millions, it's 50 million of us in the United States. And when we're looking at 300 to 350 million of us, that is a significant portion of the United States population that Google now has access to and can data mine and review essentially at will by virtue of their relation. This also tells us that HIPAA, while it is there to safeguard and protect patient data, is not the be-all end-all, because while this isn't necessarily a loophole, what HIPAA is missing is essentially transparency. And if we are looking at the government to create, let's say, laws that give us better control over our data, in fact, one presidential candidate is now talking about basically making the data that we store on Facebook or Google or whatever our personal intellectual property that basically Google or Facebook or whatever would have to buy from us. Our patient medical data should be the same way. In other words, HIPAA should be have to revise their laws to ensure that if I am signing something, let's say I sign up for Ascension Health, it should say you consent to give basically our your data to these third parties, the medical biller, your insurance company, Google, or whoever else they're working. And I should have the ability to say, yes, give it to the medical biller for obvious reasons. Yes, give it to my insurance company for obvious reasons. No, don't give it to Google because I don't want Google to have my information. And by virtue of that, there should be a recourse. But U.S. law was essentially built in terms of privacy in the Reagan era before a lot of this happened. And while HIPAA was built in the Clinton era around 1996 or so, it has been revised over and over. But that is one of the things that it's missing is transparency. And here we are. So we have 50 million citizens or patients in the United States out of the 350 million of us that are now being data mined by Google, and Google's not slowing down. I've also heard that Google wants to basically start giving bank accounts out, and that should literally be another podcast and video that I do. So we are sticking with healthcare right now, but I'd love to know your thoughts on this, because I think, quite frankly, the whistleblower clarified quite a lot of things that the media initially did not report, and I think it's a lot more damning, and it's a lot deeper than we think it is, given that they're not basically de-identifying people, and that they're data mining this to the nth degree. So let me know what you think, but that is your news of the day, and quite frankly, I think it's a tad terrifying. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.